today we're gonna learn how to draw hand lettering like these from scratch. We'll go step by step learning all the basic principles, tips and tricks to make sure your sketch doesn't turn out like this.
Brother,
I have created a free Procreate brush set for iPad users which have everything you need to follow along. But first, I definitely recommend having a basic understanding of Procreate. For my guys who don't have iPad, I have provided PDF sheets that you can print and follow along using pencil. By the way, this video is gonna go super deep into the basics of hand lettering, so if you're in rush, watch this video where I squeezed everything under 5 minutes. So grab your pencil or a stylus and let's get started. Okay, first open Procreate. Here are the dimensions I'm using and create. Once you download the file, unzip it and drag it straight into Procreate. And here are our brushes. Let's make the guideline first. First the guidelines and slant heights. Now let's learn about the guideline using this example. This line is called cap height or ascender. This is where uppercase letter or ascending part of lowercase letter sits. This line is X height. It's basically the height of lowercase letter. This is what I call weight line. It determines the thickness of letter. This is baseline. It's where our letter sits. And this is descender. It's where hanging letters like Y rest their butt. These guidelines make sure your design are consistent. Okay, so the most important principle in lettering is downstroke and upstroke. Let me demonstrate this using calligraphy brush. Whenever you go down, you apply pressure so it will be thick. And whenever you go up, release pressure so it will be thin. So basically, thick goes down, thin comes up. Let's use this principle to write few letters. So thick goes down, thin comes up, and down again and up. We got our letter U. While connecting, make sure the connection is smooth and you have this triangle kind of gap over here. Again, thick goes down, but this time thin comes up in sharp angle. Thick goes down and we have letter N. Again, make sure you have smooth connection and triangle over here. Now this one is tricky. Thin comes up, then it gradually gets thicker, then goes down and thin comes up. And we have our letter O. Let's combine these two and we have letter A. We can also write A like this. You just flick at the top, so you have to be fast. On this one, the upstroke line connects at the top rather than middle. So these are the basic building blocks of our lettering, and every letter we create are combinations of these principles. Now let's apply this in our lettering. First, I will draw outline for our lettering. Make sure to follow the guides. And now add weights using the outline as guide. As I said, thick goes down, thin comes up. So remember, keep the weight line consistent. Keep this triangle kind of gap on this connection and make sure the connection between two letters are smooth. Don't forget the weight lines and always follow the guides. This is what gonna make or break your lettering. So continue drawing. Fill with color and with some cleanup. We have our lettering. So one thing to keep in mind, if you look closely, both of this is touching the guide, but somehow this curved part look a bit lower than this line. So even it is level equally, we will have to raise it a bit over the line to optically compensate it. And you ask why? Because our brain is stupid and this thing is called overshooting. The best example of this is Google logo. So whenever you see a curved part at the top or bottom, you have to overshoot it a bit more than the flat part to optically balance it. Let's do that. Another thing we need to optically balance is kerning. It's simply the gap between your letter, and again, the best example is Google logo. As you can see, the gap are not equal. If we make it equal, then our brain will think it's not equal. I told you our brain is stupid, so we have to optically balance it. So remember these rules of kerning. If this is gap between two straight edges, the gap between straight edges and round edges are slightly less, and the gap between two round edge letters are the least. That's how everything will look balanced. So this is our final result. Oh yeah, you can also play with wet line to get a different feel, but I like to keep it high for that bubbly feel. And this looks fine, but it's too simple, like something you can just type out on computer. And I like to give my sketch some human touch. For that, we have to break some rules and add few details. But first, we have to generate some composition ideas. By the way, you have to do this at very beginning of the process, but I didn't want it to make things overwhelming at very beginning. So it is what it is, alright? So I like this one and I'll use it as a guide. First thing, I will drop C a bit below using warp tool and make E somewhat same height as C. Add little swoosh to N and some movement to E. So as you can see, the swoosh on letter N didn't work as I thought, so I'm putting it under letter L. So sometimes things might not go according to your plan, so you will have to adjust on the go. Let's do some cleanup and adjusting. By the way, the warp tool on Procreate is godsend because it makes adjusting shapes so much easier. Now fill the gaps and damn, we getting that custom handmade feel. But wait, I want you to focus on this part. Whenever you overlap one stroke with another, you have to follow these rules. Let me use this example to better understand. Thin overlap thin is good. Thick overlap thin is good. But thick overlap thick is not good. You can see the difference here. Thick overlap thick blocks the flow and doesn't look good. It looks like something is clogged up. So these rules make sure the flow is consistent and balanced. Now let's add few details like this gentle curve to make it playful. And erase a few bit to give this shadow kind of look. You can see better on the black background. Another most important thing is composition. It's basically the overall structure of our lettering, but I like to think composition as the boundary shape of lettering. It can be different types: straight, tilted, angled, distorted, circle, oval, or any other shape. All the guidelines make sure inside of lettering is balanced, and composition makes sure boundary of lettering is balanced. So both are equally important, and on Procreate you can easily adjust the composition with warp tool. Now I'll reduce the opacity a bit, and on new layer start with line work. Just draw the curves, hold it, and Procreate will automatically make it smoother. Keep doing that. And we have our final sketch. Now let's have some coffee break. So one thing about hand lettering is there are way too many styles, but the basic principles are almost same. Also, you will often see professional artists intentionally breaking rules just like we did with our sketch. Because breaking rules makes our art imperfect, and that imperfection is what gives it that handmade feel. Imperfection is what humanizes and separates our art from computer generated art. But that being said, first we have to understand the rules to break the rules, and that comes from experience. I just want to say your first sketch is gonna suck, and just for motivational purpose I'll show you my very first sketch. I know it sucks, alright? As you can see, I didn't follow the thick and thin stroke principles. Guideline is all over the place. Composition is somewhat good, but If you realize, it's the same word we created today, but this time we followed all the basic rules and you can see the difference. So if your sketch sucks right now, don't worry, keep practicing and you will improve. Coffee breaks over, now back to work. Now we're gonna add colors and effect to this sketch. If you're using pencil and paper, then you can take a picture of your sketch, drop it in your PC and follow along in Illustrator. The technique will be a bit different but the principles are same. Now let's add stroke. First make it white. Duplicate the sketch, invert the bottom sketch. This one is gonna be our stroke. Choose black. Click here, Gaussian blur and drag it. More you drag, bigger the stroke is gonna be. I will keep it at 13%. Then click here, automatic and make sure color fill is on. Now drag it until it fills the stroke. Don't drag it too much or it will fill out the whole canvas. Duplicate it and slide it a bit below. It will give it this nice 3D look. Let's merge that. Connect few bits and done. But it leaves these rough edges, so I like to go over it again and redraw some clean lines. Now let's add some colors, but wait. It doesn't completely cover it, so a better way is to make new layer, clipping mask and fill color on it and you can see the difference. Make sure to merge it. Now let's add some highlight, make a new clipping mask. I'll choose a brighter color and with soft brush go ham over it. I'll make it a bit brighter and done. Now time to add some shadows and highlight, but first let's learn about lighting. Let's assume our light source is here, so technically this part will have highlights and this part will have shadows. So this is how I usually render my lettering. First I will start with highlighting on the left. Small tip, draw stroke thin to thick for a bubbly feel. Reduce opacity and same way draw shadows on the right. Another pro tip, instead of using black and white for the highlight and shadows, select the base color and choose a brighter tone of it. And same way for the shadows, choose darker tone of the base color. This way it gives it more saturated look. You can adjust opacity as you like. Now add one more layer of hard shine to make it pop. Also, what I have been recently doing is adding one more source of lighting below the lettering. It will cast light at lower portion here and here. I basically make new layer and clipping mask and draw highlights on the lower portion of lettering. It's called rim light or something like that, but it basically gives it cinematic lighting and it looks cool. Sometimes I also add these wiggly lines and dot to give it that jelly kind of look. Now let's apply what we learned in our lettering. This is our light source. First make new layer, reduce opacity a bit and start adding highlights. Make new layer, reduce opacity a bit and start adding shadows. And make another layer and this time add white highlights. And from our other light source, let's add the rim lights. Make new layer, click clipping mask. I usually use white or yellow for this one and start adding rim lights. Now let's add some shadow below lettering. Make new layer. I use same color as lettering for shadow. Reduce opacity a bit and start drawing. As I said, shadows goes to the right. And this is what we get. But what I recently been doing is adding shadow in this way. So it gives it some shine as well. Just draw two lines thin to thick and connect it like this. Make sure to keep light source in mind. I don't know what exactly it's called, but it makes the lettering pop. Let's add another stroke around this stroke. Duplicate the stroke. Let's make it same color as lettering. Click here, Gaussian blur, then click here and drag, you know the drill. Drop some color at the back. And it still looks too bland and I want my lettering to be delicious. So let's add some drip. Just draw a line, thin to thick, and connect it using wavy lines. Some drop here and there. You can also draw these lines, it gives it lettering a sense of movement. Now add some highlights to the drip. Okay, so you can continue with the drip, but we are going to add few more details, so it might be overcomplicated for beginners, so to keep it simple, I'll remove it. Let's add gradient to this stroke just like we did with lettering. And make sure your stroke is a bit darker than lettering because you want your lettering to be the high contrast element. For simple shadow, you can just take black shape and reduce opacity, but that's too boring. We need motion blur. Drag it to the direction you want, reduce opacity, and it gives it this nice 3D kind of shadow. And here is our final lettering, but let's sprinkle some love to make it more presentable. Make new layer on top of everything, click here, freehand, make sure color fill is off and create this diagonal line, soft brush over it with white, reduce opacity, and we got nice shine. Again, take soft brush and on new layer highlight with bright color on top. Now I will group the lettering, duplicate and flatten the bottom copy, then enlarge it and reduce the opacity. It gives it this nice effect. One last thing, make new layer above everything, make sure color is set to white, click here, noise, and drag it a bit. Change it to color dodge and reduce opacity a bit. It gives it some texture and make it look more organic and professional. And we have our final result. Oh wait, I swear this is the last step. Let's add these small shadows for overlapping look. It makes it look even better. As they say, devil is in the details, so always try to think of ways to add details to elevate your design. Now we have our final result. Okay, let's repeat what we learned today. We went from line work to rough sketch, then clean sketch, then we added stroke, color to lettering, adding highlight and shadow, then rim light, then we added shadow, we added another stroke, add highlight, some shadows, and at the end, added some presentation elements. And here is our final result. At the end, if your sketch doesn't look like mine, then don't be discouraged because you know where I started from. In fact, after a couple months of drawing this very sketch, I quit for many years because it was so freaking frustrating to learn everything on your own without any proper resource. But like they say, if you really love something, then it will eventually find its way back to you. Thank you for watching. See you next time.